because we do have some grades on the site, and we need to integrate those grades. How do we fit the concepts with the grades, minimize the cost in terms of earthwork associated, and still meet the aviation standards? So I think you need at least 3 concepts and to present to the public, to present to engineering and planning, and present to this board so that you're comfortable.
What you're saying is that although maybe picture C is we may like the way it looks laying out wise, but it may cost more to put the water where it needs to be.
We'll do a rough estimate of cost for each of the concepts, and then you can, and the pros and cons of each, do a matrix, and just invite comments regarding the concepts. It's not unlike doing a PD&E study for a roadway where you look at different alternatives. I think it's important to look at alternatives. This is a 20-year plan, and you need to try to get it right. So,
thank you, Jim.
So as soon as we can get those alternative concepts and laid out and have a meeting and have it, and I want to work with y'all on how you want to structure like a public type meeting so that we can get all the feedback we can on this and get everybody's comfortable.
Let's define public too. This is not a guy like me coming in and making comments, because I don't know, I'm not qualified to make comments on that, but the aviation industry and these contractors certainly are, and that's the public I'm looking for, their input. It's going to be open to everybody, but there's a segment of the public that is key that we have their input.
Right, and it's also key we work very closely with Whiting Field folks, make them comfortable with what we're trying to do and trying to achieve. So I think there's going to be meetings, there's security issues, there's a variety of different things that we need to meet and discuss and resolve certain issues as we're in this planning process, as you talked about, Commissioner Cole, so there's no loose ends as we move forward, because it's a major investment for the taxpayers in Santa Rosa County. And so we need to make sure we dot the I's and cross the T's.
Item number 2, discussion of initiation of construction by Public Works Department on the entrance to Whiting Aviation Park. We have Cindy Anderson here. Do you want to discuss this item, Cindy?
Good morning, Commissioners. Actually, y'all have been hearing about this at least for a year, because it was December 2008 when we originally brought this to you and the capital plan being proposed by Team Santa Rosa. What we're looking at doing, and you should have sketches in your package there, is looking at the XL-decel lane and an entrance turnout into the park. This is the first of 2 entrances. It lines up with the proposed realignment of Whiting Circle that we've been working on with grant funding. We believe that this will be the primary entrance, ultimately coming off of 87 around the north part of Whiting Field. Been working with county staff. Avis has given us a cost estimate. We asked him to be extremely conservative, and that's the number that you have in front of you. If that funding is not needed, has spoken with the budget director, and the funding that's not used will go back into the economic development portion of the electric franchise fee. So with this in mind, this is something that Avis can work on when he has crews available, and it makes the transformation between 269-acre pine tree forest into a 269-acre aviation park, and that's what we're after at this point. Question that came up this morning is, please keep in mind that what we had in the original master plan was to have this initial cost come into the park, and then what our intent would be, the plan would be, is that as companies come in, now we have jobs and we can leverage other funding such as community development block grants, infrastructure grants with OTAD. So we've been very successful in the past at utilizing these grants, but for those grants you do have to have jobs. So let's get this entrance in, make it a park. Now we can get a little bit more serious with the marketing that we're doing. Hopefully in the next 30 days or so, we'll bring you back some of the marketing pieces that we've been working on for the Whiting Aviation Park. So this is step number, I should have counted, like 6. We've purchased the property, we've rezoned it, we've master planned it, we're going to finalize a master plan. We have done all the environmental work out there. Most of that had all been accomplished with grant funding. So this is really the first large chunk that we're coming and asking from the Economic Development Fund.
One of the things that I've been working with Avis and Hunter and the staff is to take a look at all of the property that we've purchased around Whiting Field and get an assessment on the value of timber. And hopefully there will be some value because we have about 800 acres now around that facility. And then any proceeds could hopefully go back into the Whiting Aviation. I know we have 110 just north of there. We've got about 300 acres, I think, now on the east side. So I know Avis and some of his people are looking at all the timber around Whiting Field.
Yeah, that could help because the timber on this piece, the pine, is not real big pine. And sometimes the mess that they leave behind costs you more to clean up than it does than what you make off of it.
Any more questions? If not, I would recommend that we move this item to Thursday's agenda and do so without objection.
Mr. Chairman, I do need some direction from the board on as to whether, once we start these turn lanes in this project, as to whether we should work overtime on this project. Obviously, there's no need to finish the project quickly, but the advantage to overtime is that, we've got crews tied up out there. We'd like to, finish the project as soon as possible, and then so we move on to other projects. I just need some direction from the board as to whether that should be considered or not.
How long will it take you to do this project?
It's going to take several weeks. I mean, it's a sizable project. It would probably take a couple of months.
Mr. Chairman, my direction on that would be you make that decision, Avis. Sometimes it's more cost effective to finish something when you start it versus shutting everything down, coming back in. So I would just simply say that's your job.
And as far as funding of overtime, I'm assuming it would come out of the funding that's going to be approved, and then we'll just see how far that funding goes if overtime's worked. And obviously, if we work overtime, it would only be on fair weather days when we could be the most productive.
I'd say I would wait till April and May, knowing that May is typically the driest month of the year, and you've got lots of daylight and warm weather. So if you do get in there, you can stick with it and get something done.
Mr. Chairman, that was my question too, is would the extra work required by this job cause overtime on other jobs, because of the time to complete those? I just don't, any cost that comes to the Public Works, I think, should be paid from economic development for this project, if it even requires overtime on other projects because of this work. And that's something he will have to determine, but I think that's something we should consider, especially because we're going to have a budget workshop here shortly, and I think we're going to find out that our tax base is even going to be lower this year.
Is that enough direction, Avis?
But I do think that Commissioner Salter's right. We need to manage this within our normal work plan, and then if there's something else, we can bring it back to the board. Okay.
All right. With that motion, hearing no objection, let's move to Thursday.